On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, we're grading your hot takes. Is Chet Holmgren really going to take a leap and get all of the accolades? We'll talk about that today.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, we're grading your hot take and answering your questions as we are sitting here today on the day of Sam Presti's preseason availability. That marks the start of every NBA season, especially for you sickos out there that follow this every single day. Next week is media day and training camp and preseason games. So we're almost right back in the swing of things. So I put out the call for your hot takes. We grade them on a 1 to 5 pepper scale. 5, of course, scorching hot. Don't think it'll happen. 1, yeah, it's a jalapeno. It's not too bad. It might have a nice kick, and it's probably going to happen. So we'll talk about that on today's show. But again, today is Sam Presti's press conference. There hasn't been a ton of drama. There hasn't been a ton of storylines about this team. And so I'm interested to hear from Sam and what all he'll be asked today. Obviously, Nikola Topic and topics like that will be brought up, and how he responds to them will be fun. We'll cover that on tomorrow's show. We also have a Locked On NBA squad show coming out for you this week. That was a lot of fun to record. I got attacked during the squad show, so make sure you go check that out as well. You can probably guess who did the attacking if you've listened to those squad shows. But we also have a new show on this very feed starting for you next week. Be sure to tune in for that. But the first hot take comes from Dirion, and they say Cason Wallace is going to be a starter by the playoffs. It's interesting. He did start, in the finals, and that was a big change for game 1, and a change that caught a lot of flack. But I've been saying on this show this summer that I think that their best lineup will end up being Cason Wallace in place of Isaiah Hartenstein, and bringing Hartenstein off the bench. I think that Hartenstein handled the change of their rotation during the finals very well. I was in the locker room talking to him after that game 1 loss, on top of the emotions of a loss, the emotions of, if you want to call it being benched, out of the starting lineup. And he handled it very well. I think he's a guy that is a team first kind of guy. And I could see this happening. Now, I will still give it a 3 because I want to hedge my bets, so to say. So for Cason Wallace, it's easy to envision Chet at the 5 working because we've seen it work before offensively. And defensively, there was no problem with either lineup. Having Cason in there as another point of attack defender, or having Ihart in there as added paint presence and letting Chet roam around a bit more. So the defensive part of this equation of who starts, to me, is not really a big factor. And the reason I put it up to a 3, even though I agree that their best lineup will probably be Cason as a starter, and I'm presuming here that you would put him as a starter in place of Ihart. The offense from Chet and Ihart together got a lot better last year as the season went on, in the sense of positioning, in the sense of finding quality shots and finding space on the floor. And what lacked at times with that double big lineup was production. And I think that Chet Holmgren's added production from the 3-point line this season, being a full year removed from that hip injury that he'll get to in early November, that could allow the double big lineup to really take off, and that double big lineup to reach a height that we haven't seen it reach yet. So I want to leave some room for that possibility, while also not calling this an outlandish take, because I think that there is a chance that it happens. And as of right now, if I had to predict their best lineup, I would agree. The next one comes from Tiki. Dub will win an MVP in his career. That's a 5 out of 5 hot take. Now, the reason that is playing next to Shea really hurts his MVP chances for the early part of his prime. Now, if he wasn't playing next to Shea and he has a lot of runway in his career left, there's a chance he doesn't play next to Shea forever. Maybe with the defensive prowess and his continued evolution as a scorer, he could reach those talks. But you saw how hard it is to win MVP if you've been tracking, even going back to Russell Westbrook's MVP campaign and especially Shea's MVP campaign. You've got to have everything work for you. It's not enough to just have the individual numbers. The individual numbers have to be historically great. It's not enough to just have historically great numbers, because there's always in this new era of such great talent across the league. The historically great numbers weren't enough to make the case for Shea to be an outright no-brainer MVP. There were still people staunchly defending Nikola Jokic as an MVP last year. It was the team success that really made that a runaway, on top of the narrative aspect of what we talked about with NBA history all throughout his MVP chase last season, that for it to go to Jokic again last year would not have followed NBA precedent. Otherwise, LeBron James and Michael Jordan would have had a lot more MVPs on their mantle right now. So there's a lot that goes into winning MVP, and it's obviously more likely that any player doesn't win it versus that they do. Sans for maybe a Luka, right? He hasn't won one yet, but it seems likely he's going to win one. And it seems like the most important people, who are the voters in this case, want Luka to have an MVP at some point. And he's also an exceptional talent, so that plays into it as well. So it's really hot to imagine him being an MVP. If you were to back this down and say that you think J-Dub will finish top 5 in MVP voting at some point in his career, that becomes less crazy. But it is an uphill climb for him to win an MVP. Gavin says the Nuggets shooting takes a hit this season. Nikola Jokic, Aaron Gordon, and Christian Brown all shot career highs, the first two by a significant margin. I still think that they're great, but it should affect a lot. Yeah, I mean, shooting is obviously volatile. I think that Aaron Gordon's leap, of course, was jaw-dropping. He'd reinvented his game, and how much of that do you think is real? I personally don't believe that the Nuggets will see a steep drop-off from this trio. And I think that being additive to a guy like Cam Johnson, adding a guy like Tim Hardaway Jr. Is an option for them that can allow them to feature a possible step back from those guys percentage-wise, but still maintain a level of three-point prowess that is good enough to keep Denver in that tier that we expect them to be in. But I do think that it is tricky every year to pin down who's going to be the best three-point shooting team. A lot of it is shot quality. A lot of it is, unless you have teams like those old Warrior teams that you just bake in that they're going to shoot 40% as the Splash Brothers, you have to have a rising tide for the rest of your roster. But I don't have that same concern with Denver that they're going to take a step back. And in fact, I think that with Cam Johnson in the fold, and with the stuff that we saw them run with DA last year, and David Edelman's now having a full season to flush out his systems and his identity onto this team, and the improved depth. I look at a guy like even Bruce Brown, who I think can have a step up year and a bounce back year, playing next to Jokic, playing in a more comfortable environment. That when you have a hub like Jokic, he's gonna be able to raise the bar of a team, both from 3-point land and from every other aspect offensively. So I don't have those same concerns. I think that hot take is a 4 out of 5, because it's not unheard of to see a team regress from 3. I just am not as much of a firm believer that it's going to happen as Gavin is. But coming up, we'll continue to grade your hot takes. We'll continue to talk about this upcoming season and media day and Sam Presti's press conference preview that'll happen this morning. A lot more coming up for you today on Locked On Thunder. But first, I want to tell you right now, my good friends over at FanDuel, folks, go check out FanDuel, because FanDuel is incredible, and the NFL season is here. It's back again tonight with Thursday Night Football. FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is great, and if you're ready to play, you can download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. If your first $5 bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets. If you only care about the NBA, not only can you go make predictions on who will win each award and who will win the conferences and the title and who will win a set amount of games over unders, but you can also already bet on NBA games themselves, singular one-off games like opening night, where the Thunder are 7.5-point favorites against the Houston Rockets. If you are into the NFL, Thursday Night Football is basically a pick 'em. The Cardinals at home are 1.5-point underdogs to the Seattle Seahawks. Go check that out today at FanDuel.com. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. You everydayers make this thing go. Dave says, hard to even say what a hot take would be with this team. Nothing is outlandish. If you want a true heater, you'd say this team will win less than 58 games, but that's not going to happen. So a positive one is OKC wins 70 and takes all the accolades back to back. Yeah, I mean, 70 is a hot take. I know that this team is viewed, especially locally, as a team that can threaten the win record and can head off and rattle off a bunch of wins. But I don't want to dismiss how difficult it was to win 68 games last year, even with the amount of injury adversity, which you don't expect them to go through this season. But you do wonder, and it's okay to wonder these things of, what does their defense look like this season in the regular season? Now, we have no concerns about what it looks like in the postseason, but can you give that all-out effort every single night on that end of the floor? And it's a really dirty, hard job to pull off. I think that they can. I think that it's in their foundation. It's what separates the Thunder's culture. It's what separates Mark from other coaches, of him instilling this in them, even whenever they were truly playing for nothing. I mean, if you think that they're somehow not playing for anything in the regular season, you're just going to turn it on for the postseason, those 20-something win teams are truly playing for nothing. And yet every night you you go listen to the Locked On host of the opponent that night in those 21 seasons, and they would tell you they're the toughest out in the league in terms of bad teams because they competed every single night. So that's just kind of the MO for this team and for Mark. And so until that changes, I'm not going to predict it so. So it's an interesting spot for their win total. It's my biggest storyline I'm watching for this season, because I don't think it's dire, right? Like, if they win 63 games, I still think that they're going to be the title favorite. I still think that they're going to be a team that should not lose in the postseason, except for to a select few teams, maybe Denver, maybe Cleveland. But if they win 75 games, it'd be a thrilling year, and it would be something to behold. So I'm very curious where they fall in that spectrum. They're the deepest, most talented team. In terms of the accolades, again, a lot of that is baked into narrative, frankly. Like, for Shea to go back to back, what does he have to do to win MVP again? And that's a good question. And it's a question that I don't know the answer to, because it would be really impossible to see him having a better individual season than leading the league in scoring, doing it as efficiently as he does, doing it on both ends of the floor, and leading a team to 68 wins. And if that story is kind of played out by the media and played out by the voters who almost begrudgingly gave him the MVP last year, it's easy to see that be passed up in the eyes of the voters, not in the eyes of reality, not in the eyes of actual basketball, but in the eyes of the decision makers for these awards. Defensive Player of the Year is a big one. Like, Chet Holmgren could easily win Defensive Player of the Year, but it also factors into who gets to the 65 game mark. Does Wemby get there, as everyone's itching to give him the Defensive Player of the Year? And I'm not saying it's wrong, but Chet has something to say about it, and we act like it's a runaway for Wemby. So all of that ties together with the back end of your take of them wiping the floor with the accolades. But they should be featured heavily on the all defensive team again, and they should be featured heavily in the all NBA teams. I think that they should get at least two guys on there, one of Chet and J-Dub at least, and then of course Shea. I think that they have a chance to get three on there. I think that there's a chance that Chet makes a step forward and J-Dub makes a step forward, where they're both on all NBA team. And again, that comes down to this 65 game rule. So it kind of throws a wrench in preseason predictions for accolades, but it is a fun hot take. And I'm going to say 5 out of 5 for the all-encompassing take, because winning 70 games, incredibly hard, even if you get way better injury luck than you did a year ago. And we just went over the accolades being hard. So I'm going to give that a 5 out of 5 hot take, but I like it. I like where your head's at. Hawaii Palms says J-Dub is a top 10 player from last year and will stamp that this season. So you've already put him in the top 10. This kind of bridges us into another topic of ESPN is rolling out their top 100 player list. And if you recall, the Thunder representation on our list, on Locked On podcast network with all of our hosts was very well. I mean, you look at this and you see Shea at number 2. You go down the list, you see that J-Dub is at 20, and then Chet's at 30. They had 3 guys in the top 30 of our top 100 lists. And with ESPN, they have not gotten to their top 10 yet. And that's where obviously Shea's going to fall at 1 or 2, likely 2, given where ESPN is at in terms of ranking Jokic and Shea. But they had Lou at 64. They had iHeart at 56. They had Caruso at 53. They had Chet at 24 and J-Dub at 11. So in the eyes of ESPN, I'll give that to you. He's basically a top 10 guy sitting there at 11. In the eyes of Andy Kameninski of Locked On Lakers, he voted J-Dub at 7 in our poll. And again, our poll was a conglomerate of all of our hosts voting in our own individual lists, and then combining that, averaging that out, and putting out the list that we got as a network, similarly to how ESPN does it. So, I mean, you can make the argument he's a top 15 player. Let's just go top 15 for the sake of this argument. But can he get to that top 10 status by the end of this season? Because for ESPN, you have to jump up 1. For us, of course, you have to jump up 10. But still, can he get there? I think it's realistic to see a scenario where that happens. Because if you look at our top 10, for example, which is the biggest hill he'd have to climb, and we don't know quite yet the hill for ESPN, the exact order of it. But Jason Tatum still finds his way in our top 10. You look at the 11 through 20 as he sits at 20. You could see him passing Kawhi. You could see him passing Devin Booker. Karl-Anthony Towns is interesting. Cade Cunningham being over him is very interesting. Evan Mobley, Anthony Davis, Tyrese Halliburton is still there as he's an injured player, won't play at all this season. LeBron and KD. So it's not out of the realm of possibility if he translates from the postseason to the regular season. And in that postseason, man, he was playing a different form of basketball, a more aggressive style, a more forceful style, especially on the ball as a scorer. If he does that over the course of an 82-game season and then does it again over the course of another long playoff run, then yeah, he'll be a top 10 player. So I don't think that it's too hot of a take to say this. I think that if you look at him and you look at this take, it'd be a 2 out of 5, because you want to give yourself some room to perhaps he's still a top 15 player next season, not a top 10 player, but it's still good to anticipate that for J-Dub. Terry Floyd says, here's my hot take. ESPN finally gives Shea the respect he deserves. Who am I kidding? And I think that this can go for the Thunder as well, of like, will the Thunder be respected this year? We spent all last regular season shaking our fist at these articles and storylines that popped up of people not being afraid of the Thunder. Oh, they weren't scared of the Thunder. Oh, the Thunder are too corny for their post-game interviews. Oh, the Thunder are too young for their own good. And all these different non-basketball reasons that they couldn't do it. And then they did. And then they won a title. And with that comes more legitimacy, comes more credibility for this team, proving it in the playoffs as a team that had previously been in a second-round exit. Like that was their resume as a postseason team. So they've built up their resume. They've built up their credibility as a team, and the national media, I think this summer has kind of caught up to where we're at locally with how good this thing can be. But it's interesting to see what the narrative is around OKC. If they, of course, go wire to wire again as the 1 seed, they're going to be forced into respecting OKC. But I'm curious if they don't go wire to wire. I'm curious if they don't go wire to wire as the 1 seed. Where does ESPN fall on that? Because last year, Boston had a long rap sheet of success. They had a long rap sheet of playoff success in particular. And when they weren't quite the best team in the East, obviously, with Cleveland's regular season, and they weren't even better than the Thunder in the regular season, everyone still counted them in. They still counted them as like, okay, they're sleepwalking. Don't worry about them at all. Will the Thunder get that same credit of, if they do stumble a little bit in the regular season, being a team that is put in that category of don't at all worry about them? Or will it be overblown by the national media? And the Thunder are in control of that. I don't know if they will or won't stumble this regular season, but I am curious how the national media reacts to OKC this season, because I think that it can go one of 2 ways, and only the second way that we describe leaves it up to interpretation. Because if they do just go wire to wire as the best team in the league, they have no choice but to respect Oklahoma City. Barbara says Chet and J-Dub are going to be even better than people think they will be this year. and this is a hot take that I'm not going to grade because I don't want to grade it unfairly. It depends what you've been hearing about these two guys. If you've listened to a lot of national conversation, we've all been saying, myself, Andrew Schlecht, and the big national, the big local people covering this team have been saying that, they're going to be all-star status, all NBA status, all defensive status. They've been there. So being better than that seems perplexing. Now, if you've listened to some national coverage where they've had more question marks, and particularly about Chet and about what he looks like offensively this year, can he really make a massive leap? Then it becomes a more fair hot take. So it's hard to grade this one. But ultimately, I think that this really hinges on Chet. And I get why we tie the two together. I really do. But I think that Chet has more questions to answer than J-Dub does this year. And it's why that on last week's show, where we went over who has the most pressure on them for this team, we put Chet Holmgren at the top. And pressure's not a bad thing. Pressure is earned, and Chet's earned that pressure because of what we think is capable for him to do this season. So we'll see about Chet. We'll monitor that all season long. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll come back with more of your hot takes. But first, I want to say right now, my good friends over at Skims, go check out Skims today, because when I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family that I had to give it a try. Let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I've always, wondered what was out there in terms of the premium underwear, and Skims fits the bill, especially with their, of course, men's line that offers the boxer style, the brief style, whatever style you like. They have it there for you. It's the perfect balance of comfort and style. It moves with you. It's very, very, very high quality. And I tell you what, it's the best in the business for me. They've sent us some pairs. We've been using them. All of our hosts have been wearing them. And I tell you what, when our hosts get together for our weekly meetings, Skims is a topic of those meetings unprovoked. And obviously, we're not trying to sell it to each other. We're already owning them, and we still can't get over how great of a quality they are. So you want to try them today by shop SKIMS Men at skims.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select my show in the drop-down menu that follows, and they'll know that we sent you, and then you'll get the best pair of underwear you've ever owned. So make sure you go check it out today at skims.com. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. We're here talking about your questions, your hot takes, what's on your mind ahead of this season. OKC Hog says Jay will have a much bigger role in the playoffs and will make a big impact for OKC. Right now, I say 4 out of 5 hot take, because there are matchups where he'll have a bigger impact. I still look at Houston as a bigger impact team. And we've talked about Houston this week with the Fred VanVleet injury. They're still going to be an identity team that is a bigger matchup. And you're still going to need to lean on your front court depth against that team. And Jay will have an opportunity to play. He'll have an opportunity to succeed, just like he did in the second round last year. The second round was Jay Will's round last year, and he was awesome in his role against Denver. Denver's another team. We just saw how that happens. Like, he's going to play against Denver. He's going to play really well against Denver. But we also saw, for as important as he was in the second round, they didn't have to go back to him a ton against Minnesota, against Indiana. Now, against Cleveland, for example, he can be a massive part of the Cleveland rotation. So this hot take is kind of rooted in theory that we don't know the answer to yet. Like, it's an equation that we don't know the answer to yet for what Jay Will's role looks like. Because if they go through a situation where perhaps the Fred VanVleet injury makes it so the Thunder are playing the Rockets in round 2 as the 1-4 matchup, and then they play Denver in the West Finals, and then they play Cleveland. 3 series in a row. Jay Will's going to be massive. He's going to be a massive part of this. Perhaps the playoff series looks like Dallas in round 1, because they had to sneak in there late in the play-in tournament after the Kyrie stuff with Kyrie's injury. Perhaps they don't have the season that they anticipate having without him there, and he gets them into the play and gets them into the playoffs. So it's a 1-8 OKC Dallas, and you go Dallas, Houston, Denver, Cleveland. Jay Will's playing in all the playoff games. He's playing in all the playoff rotations, and he's a big part of that. And it looks night and day compared to his role last year, and thus your take is proven right. But what if you only play Denver? What if Cleveland doesn't make it? What if you don't play Houston with the matchups and how the bracket breaks, and you just play Denver? And in the East, New York comes out of the East, and in between there, you just play one big team. Then his role, I think, looks similar to how it looked last year. I think that Jay Will can still improve. And Joe Mazzato and I last night and on yesterday's show, we talked a lot about that, about what Jay Will's role can be this year. Can he get better defensively? Can he turn himself into a plus drop coverage big? Because the offensive stuff, I feel very confident in what Jay will. The defensive stuff has gotten better. It's improved. I think that honestly, it's gotten better than people have really given him credit for on the defensive end. But you've still got to make progress if you want to play in every matchup and not just be a specialized player. So that's kind of where I'm at with your hot take. You can kind of grade that on a scale, a moving scale. And I think that the reason why I would say it's a hot take is because it's so matchup dependent. It's not something I can affirm for you right now in September. I've got to affirm that for you in April and in May and in June, whenever we see what these matchups end up being. KJB says having a quote unquote short summer by playing in game 7 of the finals is overblown. Shea, for example, plays in the Olympics last year. Practice for the Olympics begins in June and the games go until late August. And so he's thought a great season. This team is young. The guys will be fine. Look, I think that it can be overblown, but there are certain things where I'm going to take the player's word for it. And you talk to the previous champions and they all talk about the feeling of that short summer. And I mean, is it overblown? That's a great question. That's a great example of Shea in Olympics. And yes, these guys are playing nonstop basketball. This is a year-round sport. Nike had a whole basketball never stops campaign because of how much these guys are performing. And they do it in pickup runs and pro-ams and the Olympics and FIBA and Eurobasket, et cetera, et cetera. But it does take a toll on you, and it's not impossible. It's not a feat that is unobtainable to go back to back and deal with these short summers, but it is a factor, and the Thunder can decide how much of a factor that they let it be. Now, do I think it'll be a massive factor? No, for all the reasons that you mentioned. This team is so young. This team is so hungry. This team is they're in this era where they're used to being, all these guys grew up playing AAU. All these guys grew up playing basketball all year round, and they're almost more conditioned for playing games than not. So I think that will help them as well, just the identity of a young team. But it is a factor at some point. Now, how much stock you want to put into it, it's up to you, really. Donnie says they'll coast to 68 wins, a.k.a. AJ, Topic, etc., play legit rotational minutes in a lot of games. So basically, they're going to still blow out teams is how I'm going to take this. Let's take the win total out of this, the 68 wins or the 70 wins or whatever win marker you want to put on there. But let's just talk about what happens at the end of games. Can they still have a historic point differential? Last year, they had the best point differential in the NBA. We talked about it all season where Shea only played, Shea sat out of a quarter of the fourth quarters of the whole season, and that kind of artificially got him rest last year as for the main rotational pieces of this team. Yeah, I think that this team will still blow out teams. So I totally agree with Donnie here. This team will still blow out teams, and on top of blowing out teams, they'll still find unique ways to balance minutes for AJ and for Nikola Topic this year. We've seen Mark do it every year of his career, where he's unique in his what he calls roster exploration, balancing that with winning games. But it does bring up what I think is the biggest storyline for Media Day and for training camp is Nikola Topic. First of all, for training camp, training camp is where I think you find a lot of information out. And it's why it's so important for you to listen to Lockdown Thunder, for you to follow on Twitter for all the quotes that come out of training camp practices, because the players are the first to know who can actually play, who can actually perform. And the guys that they're buzzing about, especially unprompted, like that tells you a lot. Last year, it was AJ Mitchell. Somehow everything came back to AJ Mitchell from every player on the roster, superstar to bench player. Everybody, Mark kept talking about AJ the whole week of training camp. And you got to the start of the season, and what do you know? AJ's in the rotation as a rookie, as a second-round rookie, as a point guard second-round rookie with a team that you guys spent all the last 3 years crying that there's too many guards on this team. So, you can really learn a lot from training camp and who these guys are talking about. So firstly, how does the team talk about Topic during training camp? But also, do we get any insight today from Sam, Monday from Mark, about what the plan is for Nikola Topic? Is there a situation where they can envision him, or do they already have days baked in to him playing with the G League? Do they want to make this a situation where he develops with the Thunder and really doesn't play with the Blue? Perhaps he goes and practices with the Blue on certain days, because the Blues practices can be more intensive than Thunder in-season practices. You saw that a lot last year. We'll see we'll see what that looks like for AJ and Topic and these guys. I think that AJ has a role in this team, irregardless of blowouts and close games or whatever. Like, he's going to be in the rotation to me. Topic is interesting. He's more so a guy that I think can play a lot in blowouts. So I would agree that they're going to have ways to get them on the floor, whether it's by winning 68 games or 62 games. So that's kind of where I'm at with your hot take. Zach says OKC repeats again. This hot take has to be a 3 to me because they're hot. It's a hot take in the sense of how hard it is to win a championship, in the sense of what they're going to have to go through to buck this current trend of parity. But when you sit back and look at it, they're the best team. They're the most deepest team in the NBA. They're the favorites for a reason. So I can't call it a scorching hot take. I can call duh, spelled the way I just said it. This is a 5 out of 5 hot take. AJ Mitchell wins 6th man of the year. 5 out of 5 hot take. I'd love for that to happen. It would really bolster my preseason hot take prediction on the hot take show that myself and Michael Martin did, where I said that he'd be a top 8 player in this rotation come playoff time. But I don't think that he'll get the 6th man of the year honors for this team. Jordan says the Thunder will have 4 members on the all defensive team: Queso, Chet, Dub, and Lou. Man, 4 is a lot because remember, there's only 2 all defensive teams, not 3 like there are for all NBA, which I think is a mistake by the league. So that's 4 out of 10 spots. However, if you believe like I do that this team will be an outlier in the sense of they were elite last year, they're going to be elite again this year, even though the history of the NBA tells us that doesn't happen a lot, I still think that they will be. It'll be undeniable, really, to put at minimum 3 of those guys, Chet, J-Dub, and Lou, on that team. And I think that Kaysen had a case last year. I talked about that during award season a year ago. So I'm going to give you a 3 out of 5 hot take on this one. There's a lot of hot takes in here. We're going to get to a lot more of them at the end of tomorrow's show after we're done recapping what Sam Presti said. So if you didn't have your hot take answered today or question answered today, rest assured it'll be answered tomorrow. But we will also tomorrow talk all about what Sam Presti said at his preseason media availability. And until then, be good and be good to one another.